Okay, hello and welcome back. WordPress SEO, this is the Yoast plugin. If you're using a different SEO plugin, the settings will be similar, but Yoast is the one I get on well with. It's well received and it seems to work quite well. Right, this is the default that it gives. If you wanted to go back to the default for any reason, you'd click the Reset Default Settings button, but you're probably not going to do that. I've allowed tracking of anonymous data. I'm happy enough with the guy that does the plugin. I haven't donated, but you can do. He's quite happy, obviously, if you do. By default, it leaves the advanced part of the meta box. Whatever, again, defaults are good. If you're on Google Webmaster Tools or Bing Webmaster Tools, or you've got an Alexa identification ID, put the data in there. What the Alexa identification ID does, if you want your website crawled by Alexa and have rankings and stuff on it, then you need an ID, and you can either upload a file to your website or just fill in that box. So you put your IDs in those as appropriate. Titles and meta descriptions. I tend to tick force title rewrites, even though it says you don't necessarily need to do that. What that does is if you use a separate title on Yoast, which I suggest you do, it'll just make sure that happens. The meta settings, no index subpages of archives, go for that. Use the meta keywords tool, no. Use the no ADP, no. And no wider. Right, meta keywords tag pretty much is obsolete. It was around in the early days of the internet, and about 3 minutes after it was invented it got spammed. So pretty much any search engine ignores it completely, so it's not really worth your time putting keywords in. No ODP. Open directory demos. If you're lucky enough to get in, tick that box, because otherwise Google and sometimes Bing will override your description with the boring one that the Open Directory Demos puts in. Similarly, if you pay for a Yahoo directory, tick that box, but generally speaking you're not going to need that. Clean up the head. I don't normally tick that, but I've ticked a couple of things, so save settings. You clean up the head. What those will do is just make the code in the header slightly smaller. So there's that bit. Okay, social. Add Facebook Open Graph data is ticked by default. I don't tend to do anything with that, but it could be. So leave that, and if you've got anything to do with Facebook Open Graph where you even understand what it is, put stuff in. Front page settings, tend not to use. Twitter, if you want to add that, tick it, and if you want your username, put that in there, which will be your Twitter name without the @ sign. I tend to leave all of those as default. XML sitemaps, they're useful because that saves having a separate plugin, and again it's ticked by default. What will happen is that every time you create a new post, it will amend your sitemap, which is useful because that means the search engine robots stand a better chance of crawling around. I'll typically also tick the ping Yahoo and ping ask, just because you can. It excludes media by default. Normally you'd leave those included, which is what happens if they're not ticked. And it's worth getting rid of categories, tags and format, because they just clutter up the sitemap. So tick those and then go for save settings. Permalinks we've already set to whatever it was, so don't need to set anything in that. Internal links I don't tend to go to. Enable breadcrumbs. If you want to do what's known as a breadcrumb trail on a site, which is another way of navigating around it, you can. You'll see that a lot on things like Amazon, where it says you're in this category and a subcategory of it or whatever, but for a smallish site, not worth going for, and pretty much ignore. RSS, WordPress by default creates an RSS feed. Stands for really simple syndication. You don't need to know much about that. You can add stuff there if you understand what you're doing. I tend to leave it as is. Import and export. If you've got a default Yoast thing, you can do it. Again, I tend not to use it. Edit files will almost certainly be scary, and you wouldn't want to do that, generally speaking. What the files, though, are robots text, which is basically line by line that says allow any robot to come in. Don't let it crawl around the CGI bin. Don't let it crawl around any of the back-end WordPress stuff or anything else. So the defaults are sensible. Leave them as that. htaccess file, scary thing to amend, and if you do, on your own head be it, because if you get it wrong, it can mess up your whole site. So that's the Yoast SEO plugin. We'll show you how to use that on actual post in another video, but that's it for the default. Not much to change, just a couple of things, if that. So, and then that makes your site ready to be search engine optimized. It just puts all the ducks in the right row to be used. So a couple more plugins to talk about, which we'll do in the next video. Okay, welcome back. 2 more plugins to go. WP Shorties and yet another related posts. I'm actually going to do them in slightly in reverse order because yet another related post has a settings page, as you can see there, but I never touch it. So basically I just use its defaults and it comes up with some quite good things, so I'm happy to let it go that way. But WP Shorties puts its own soft warp thing in, because that's the name of the people that do it, and that brings you across to that. What you can do is paste a URL into there, and I'll find one to paste. Okay, I've got one copied, and once you click away from that field, it'll give you a really ugly short URL, so change that to something better and click save. I'll move the screen across slightly. Please configure the option it's saying there. Okay, so that means I need to go on to options. I've forgotten about that. And basically, even though it's given you defaults, it doesn't put them in by default. So save the changes. Back to the main page. It's now configured. And if I click on that, copy link location, I've just pasted that into Notepad so you can see what it does. But that will, if you want to use it in your post, I find the easiest way is to right click and copy link location. I'm in Firefox. Internet Explorer has something similar. You can then click it just to check it goes to the right place. It's going off to my website, so yes. And what will happen now, if I move the screen across and press refresh, it'll show that's been clicked once, and the logs option will also show that's been clicked once. It will show which IP address clicked it. That's my current IP address, so you can get a little bit of data there. It'll show you the date and time it was clicked. So if you're one of these control freaks that likes going and checking logs all the time, you've got them with this. But the main reason for it is it keeps your links nice, neat and tidy, and it means that if someone's clicking on, for instance, an affiliate link or something like that that you want to disguise, or you just want to take them off to an Amazon link which is long and stupidly ugly, then you put the long URL in there and give it something meaningful as a name, and then you've just got an easy way to show it. So that's all the plugins I normally do. What we'll do in the next video is just show you how Yoast works in practice on a post and a page, and the last couple of settings that once you've got a post and a page set up. So we'll start looking at that in the next video. Okay, welcome back. I'm going to show you next how to put a post on, because some people aren't always sure with WordPress. The dashboard will actually nowadays give you write your first blog post, Or what I tend to do is go across to posts. I usually click on that and then click on add new. You can go direct to add new, or it's up on that screen there, but they know that people find it. I'm going to move the screen across a bit so that you can maybe see, and I'll squash the screen down a bit so you can see what it is. Okay. You'd put your post title in, so post title goes here, and then you need to put some text. And what I'm going to do is just put some Latin text in, just because it's easy to generate, because there's sites that do it, so bear with. Okay, the Latin's meaningless, it's just what typewriter, well, printers and things have used as placeholder text effectively. So we've got a it's called lorem ipsum. If you want to generate it just for clients or whatever, you can just find loads of sites that will generate that. Ignore that, it's just there to put some quick content in rather than you watching me type stuff out. That's the title I'm going to use, and that's the main post. Now coming back further down, as you can see that it's got it as a demo site at the moment, so SEO title is the first bit that I put in, and you can see it change there. The focus on that page is going to be that. Wouldn't normally be, but that's it. And then the meta description is just going to be, normally you would craft this, because I'll show you what it does in a second, but let's put some gibberish in. I'm sure Romans would disagree with me. And that tells me that I've got less characters left. Now, right, what that'll do, meta description is limited. Actually, let's go back to the title. The title's limited to 70 characters. I'd go with 65 rather than 70. What happens is that Google will cut it off after that. Well, in fact, before that usually. So 65 to 70 characters is your title. 156 characters is the meta description. Now, normally what that would be, I'm cutting the wrong bit there, a call to action, but you can see it will appear there, and because it knows that's your focus keyword, it will do what Google does, which is bold the bits that happen. Once you're happy with that, you can either save as a draft, which I'm going to do, or you could have published. That's the next bit I'm going to talk about. If you remember, we set the permalink up, and that's a bit long, so I'm going to cut that down to size, change that. Up to you whether you do that or not, but if the URL goes on for too long, I find it a bit yucky. And then the power of Yoast is, once you've set all those, you can also do a page analysis. That says it's very difficult to read. That's because it's Latin. Yes, it would be. Keyword density is low because I haven't really done very much on that. There's no images. Page title is a bit short. Not got any outbound links, no subheadings, but the keyword phrase appears in the title, so you can see these change from red as warnings, amber as okayish, and green as fine. And you can follow through the recommendations as you see fit, really. Advanced, generally you wouldn't go into here. The defaults are fine. But what this means is you can go right the way down to page level and say, set the robots text, various meter tags on the page, so you can, if you want the whole page to be no follow, it can be useful if it's a link off to other sites you don't really care about. Leave it, normally it's indexed, but if you again didn't want it indexed by the search engines, and that's only a recommendation, so don't rely on that, you can change that, and you can do those, and if what I was doing to highlight more than one, you can hold the control key down to do more than one. So none of those, including the sitemap auto detect, which comes back to the settings we set earlier. Sitemap priority, do it automatically, because you're never going to do that. I don't. It's only a recommendation anyway. Google will totally ignore it. Canonical is something that basically it can be important, but it probably isn't. If you're not doing almost identical pages, then you won't use that. If you are, then just read up on it, because it's longer than I can explain in the video and most people won't need it. 301 redirect, what that means is if you had an old page that was still linked to by people but is now out of date and it's now been replaced by a new page, I don't know if it's last year's packages that you're offering and now you want to redirect to this page, this year's packages, and you've changed the page name, then you'd use that 301 redirect box. Related posts, yet another related post plugin will do, and then the publish button will actually make that live on the site. Sometimes takes a little while, but not very long usually. View post. There we have the first page on our site. A couple of other things you can do on that, but we'll show you those in next but one video. So that's as easy as it is, and if you make any changes to that page, you'll see that the publish button changes to update. So we'll do a bit more on posts in the next video.